Hello, and welcome back to Lacrim Noir. Before we begin, feel free to leave a comment and tell me where you're listening from. I always enjoy reading them. If you're drawn to dark, haunting stories, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Now settle in, clear your mind, let the outside world slip away, and let's begin. Story 1. This happened about 10 years ago when I was in middle school, probably in 8th grade. I was around 13 years old, still at that age where you think you understand the internet just because you know how to use it, but you really have no idea how dangerous people can be. Looking back now, I can see how careless I was, but at the time it all felt normal. It just felt like one more boring afternoon after school. One of those days where you get home, throw your backpack somewhere, and look for anything to keep yourself entertained. That day, I went into my room and got on my computer. I had one set up on a small desk near my bed. And like a lot of kids back then, I would mess around in random online chat rooms when I had nothing better to do. Usually I did it with friends because it was funny to joke around with strangers and then laugh about it later, but that afternoon I was alone and just bored. I didn't have any big reason for logging on, I just wanted to kill time. At first the whole thing was pretty normal. I jumped into a chat room, typed back and forth with random people, made a few dumb jokes, and wasted time the way kids do online. Most of the conversations were forgettable. A lot of people were annoying. Some were obviously lying about who they were, and some just disappeared after a few messages. It was exactly what you would expect from a random chat room. Then I started talking to a girl. She said she was in high school. And right away, that got my attention. At that age, an older girl talking to me felt like a big deal. She seemed friendly, easy to talk to, and different from the usual weird people you run into online. I stopped messing around and started having a real conversation with her. We talked like two normal people getting to know each other. Nothing about it seemed creepy or strange at first. I asked her where she lived, and she said she lived in the same state as me. That alone felt like a funny coincidence. Then she got more specific and said she lived in a town that actually wasn't that far from mine. That made it feel even more real. I remember thinking how crazy it was that out of all the random people online, I had somehow ended up talking to someone who lived nearby. It made me trust her more. It made the whole thing feel less like internet nonsense and more like an actual connection. We talked for a while longer, and eventually she asked if I had Kik. Back then, Kik was really popular. A lot of people used it, especially younger people, because it was easy and everybody seemed to have it. Of course I had one too. Moving the conversation there didn't feel weird to me at all. If anything, it made the whole thing seem more real, like we were graduating from random chat room strangers to actual messaging. Once we switched over to Kik, I looked at her profile picture. I remember being excited because she looked pretty. At 13, that was more than enough to pull me in completely. I wasn't thinking like an adult. I wasn't analyzing whether the photo could be fake or stolen. I just saw an attractive older girl and felt lucky that she was talking to me. Over the next week, we kept messaging each other. I started to really look forward to it. I would check my phone a lot, hoping she had replied. The attention felt exciting. It felt flattering. I was just a middle school kid, and here was this good-looking high school girl acting like she was interested in me. At that age, you don't question something like that nearly enough. You just let yourself enjoy it. We talked about normal stuff, school where we lived, random everyday things. Nothing about the conversation seemed especially suspicious to me. At one point, I asked her for her Snapchat, but she said she didn't have one. Now, that probably would have sounded weird, or at least worth questioning. But at the time, it didn't bother me. Snapchat was still pretty new back then. I had only made one myself a couple of months earlier, so it didn't feel impossible that she just didn't use it. After about a week of talking, she said we should hang out. That was the moment when my excitement really shot up. I remember sitting there, staring at my phone, almost shocked that this was actually happening. Of course, I couldn't drive because I was only 13, but she told me she had just turned 16 and had recently gotten her license. That made everything sound even more believable. It fit neatly into the story she had already told me about being in high school. I didn't see any reason not to believe her. So I told her to come over on Friday after school. Even now, when I think back on that, it makes my stomach turn. I gave my home address to someone I had never actually met. At the time, though, I didn't fully understand what that meant. I thought I was being bold, maybe even a little cool. I thought I was making plans with an older girl who liked me. I didn't think of it as giving a stranger access to my house. I didn't think of it as something dangerous at all. She agreed to come. For the next few days, I was excited in the stupid, nervous way only a 13-year-old can be. I remember thinking about what I would say when she got there, whether my parents would notice anything weird, whether she would actually look like her profile picture, whether this whole thing was somehow too good to be true. Deep down, there was a small part of me that thought it felt a little strange, but not enough to stop me. More like the kind of strange you brush off because you want something to be real. When Friday finally came, I was ready the second I got home from school. I remember going straight to my phone and messaging her almost immediately. I wanted to make sure she was still coming. But when I sent the message, there was no response. At first, I didn't worry too much. I figured maybe she was driving. Maybe she was busy. Maybe she just hadn't checked her phone yet. So I waited. Then I waited some more. More time passed, and still nothing. The excitement started turning into embarrassment. I began to feel stupid for getting my hopes up. Eventually, I convinced myself she just wasn't coming. Maybe she changed her mind. Maybe she had been lying the whole time. Maybe she decided I was just some dumb kid and stopped caring. Later that night, I checked Kik again and saw that her account was gone completely. That confused me more than anything. It wasn't just that she had stopped replying. The account had disappeared. At first, I thought maybe she blocked me or deleted the app or something like that. I felt disappointed, but not devastated. Honestly, I also felt a little relieved. Part of me had thought the whole thing felt off from the beginning, even if I didn't want to admit it to myself. So I decided to just forget about it. A few days later, though, she messaged me again. It happened out of nowhere, sometime the next week. I remember staring at the screen, confused because I thought the account was gone for good. She said she was sorry she couldn't make it. But something had come up. That was all. By then, I was mostly over the whole thing. The excitement had worn off. I replied with something simple, like, "It's fine. Don't worry about it." She sent back a smiley face, and I didn't answer. I wasn't really interested anymore. More than that, I think something in me just didn't want to deal with it. So I turned off notifications for Kik and left it alone. That should have been the end of it. Later that same day, when I came home from school, I walked into my room and noticed my window was open. That stood out to me right away because I almost never opened it. I always kept it shut. But even then, I didn't jump to anything serious. I figured maybe one of my parents had opened it for some reason, maybe to let air in or something, and then forgotten to close it. It seemed a little odd, but not enough to make me panic. I just shut it and moved on. The rest of the evening was completely normal. I did some homework, played video games, wasted time the way I usually did, and eventually got ready for bed. Nothing happened that made me think I was in danger. Nothing happened that made me connect the open window to the girl from Kik. That idea never even crossed my mind. It was just one small, weird thing in an otherwise ordinary day. Around 11 that night, I got into bed. I lay there in the dark, getting ready to fall asleep, when I suddenly thought about her again. I don't even know why. Maybe it was because the whole account disappearing and reappearing still bothered me. Maybe I was just curious. Maybe some part of me still wanted an explanation. Whatever it was, I reached over to my nightstand, picked up my phone, and opened Kik. I had several unread messages. All of them were from her. The first one said, "Hey, I've decided to come over today." Even reading that now gives me chills. The next message said, "I'm here, where are you?" Right after that, there was a picture of my bedroom. I remember the exact feeling that hit me when I saw it. My body went cold so fast it felt like all the air had been sucked out of the room. It was unmistakably my room. My bed, my desk, my window, everything. The photo had been taken from inside. The next message said, "Guess I will just wait for you here." And then the last one, sent about an hour before I looked, said, "Look in your closet." I don't think I had ever felt real terror before that moment. There are times in life when you get scared suddenly and your mind races, but this was different. It was like my body shut down before my thoughts could even catch up. I remember staring at the screen, then slowly looking across the room toward my closet. It was on the other side, the door slightly cracked open, not wide enough to see inside clearly. Just enough to feel wrong. I couldn't move at first. I was frozen in bed, holding my phone, staring between the glowing screen and that dark crack in the closet door. Every possible thought slammed into me at once. Maybe it was a prank. Maybe someone broke in. Maybe the messages were fake somehow. Maybe nobody was actually there. But I knew somebody was. The picture proved that. Slowly, I forced myself to sit up. My whole body felt weak and heavy, but I managed it. Then I stood up from the bed, still staring at the closet. I didn't want to turn my back on it. I didn't want to blink. I didn't want to do anything that might cause whoever was inside to move before I could react. I took a step, then another. And then the closet door started to open on its own. At first, it moved so slowly that I almost thought I imagined it. Then it opened farther, inch by inch, like whoever was inside was doing it carefully, almost calmly. I remember my jaw dropping. I remember this strange moment where my mind still wanted to believe it would be the girl somehow, even though every part of me already knew it wasn't. And then I saw him. Not a girl. A full-grown man. That image has stayed with me ever since. I can still see him in that dark closet, emerging just enough for me to know exactly what I was looking at. I don't even remember details of his face anymore. My brain didn't care about details then. It just understood one thing instantly and completely. This was an adult man hiding in my bedroom closet. That was enough. I ran. I didn't scream first. I didn't ask questions. I didn't freeze again. Something in me just snapped into survival mode. I turned and ran as fast as I could out of my room, down the hallway, and straight into my parents' bedroom. I slammed their door shut behind me and started waking them up, panicked and probably barely making sense. At first they were confused, which makes sense now. Imagine being woken up in the middle of the night by your terrified 13-year-old son, who's trying to tell you there's a man in his closet. It sounds unbelievable, but I was hysterical enough and young enough that my dad knew I wasn't making it up for attention or as some kind of joke. He got up and went to my room. I still remember waiting in my parents' bedroom while he was gone. It felt like forever, even though it was probably only a couple of minutes. I kept imagining the man attacking him, or hiding somewhere else, or coming down the hallway. I was shaking so hard that I could barely breathe normally. When my dad came back, he said the man was gone. But he also said my closet was all messed up inside, and my window was open again. That was all the proof anybody needed. The police were called after that. By then, I was still terrified. But I was also embarrassed in that way kids get embarrassed, even in serious situations. I didn't want to explain that I had been talking online to someone who claimed to be a high school girl and gave out my address. I didn't want to say out loud how stupid I had been. So I don't think I really told the full story. We mostly treated it like a break-in because technically that's what it was. When I checked Kik again, the account had disappeared once more. Gone completely. So even if I had wanted to help more, I'm not sure I could have. There was nothing left to show. No profile. No messages from a live account. Just what I had already seen and what had already happened. Nothing else ever came from it after that, at least not in a direct way. No one came back. No more windows were opened. No more messages appeared. No one was caught, at least not as far as I know. Life kept moving, which is the strange thing about events like that. Even something terrifying eventually gets buried under school, years, growing up, work, and everything else that comes after. But it never really leaves you, for a long time afterward. I couldn't sleep right if my closet door was even slightly open. I checked windows constantly. I became suspicious of small things I never used to think about, like shadows in corners or noises outside at night. And the biggest change was how I thought about people online. Before that, the internet felt playful to me, random. A little weird sometimes, but mostly harmless. After that, I understood in a very real way that you never actually know who you're talking to. It sounds obvious now, something adults say all the time, but when you're 13, those warnings feel distant and generic. They don't feel personal. They don't feel real until something happens that puts a face or in my case, the absence of a real face, on the danger. What scares me the most now is not even the image of the man in the closet, although that was terrifying enough. What really stays with me is the idea of the time I didn't know about. The hours between when he messaged me saying he was there and when I finally checked my phone. The fact that while I was somewhere else in the house, or maybe doing homework, or playing video games, that man had already been inside my room. He had taken a picture. He had waited. He had enough confidence to message me about it like it was some sick joke. And I had no idea. That thought still makes me feel sick. It also makes me think about how different that night could have been. If I had gone to sleep without checking Kik, I don't know what would have happened. If I had been the kind of kid who ignored messages before bed, or if I had left my phone somewhere else, or if I had decided I was too tired to look, I might have stayed in that room all night with him still in the closet. I think about that more than I like to admit. People say stuff like that all the time after scary situations, talking about close calls and what-ifs. But this one has always felt too real to brush off. One tiny decision, one random moment of curiosity, might have saved me from something far worse. I also think about how careful this person must have been. Whoever was behind that fake account spent time building trust. He didn't rush. He didn't say anything too strange too early. He acted like a normal girl, talked to me long enough to make me comfortable, got me to move the conversation to another app, used a profile picture that made the story believable, then got my address. That means it wasn't random in the way I used to think it was. It wasn't just some impulsive creep trying his luck. It was planned. That makes it scarier somehow. The account disappearing and reappearing also feels different to me now. Back then, I thought it was just weird. Now I think it was probably intentional. Maybe he deleted it to avoid being traced. Maybe he blocked and unblocked me. Maybe there were other accounts too. I don't know. But I do know that somebody on the other side of that screen knew exactly what he was doing while I was just a bored kid after school. That's the part I really want people to understand whenever I tell the story. At 13, I thought danger looked obvious. I thought bad people online would immediately sound creepy or suspicious. I thought I would somehow just know if someone was fake. But that isn't how it works. The really dangerous ones know how to sound normal. They know how to be patient. They know how to create just enough comfort to get what they want. And sometimes all they need is one stupid kid who is flattered by attention. I got lucky. That's the truth of it. Not smart. Not brave. Lucky. Lucky that I checked my phone. Lucky that I ran immediately. Lucky that my parents were home. Lucky that my dad believed me. Lucky that the man decided to leave instead of confronting us. There are so many worse endings to a story like this, and I know that. The older I get, the more I understand just how bad it could have been. Nothing else happened after that night, at least not directly, but the memory of it has never really faded. It taught me a lesson in the worst possible way, and even now, years later, I still sometimes think about that picture of my room, sent to me while the person who took it was still inside. I still think about the closet door cracking open by itself. I still think about how the room that felt safest to me suddenly became the most dangerous place in the house. And more than anything, I think about how easy it was. That's the part that chills me the most. He didn't need to force his way into my life. I invited him in without realizing it. One conversation in the chat room, one move to kick, one address sent because I wanted to believe a pretty older girl liked me. That was all it took. Nothing else happened after that, but honestly, it didn't need to. Once was enough. Story 2. When I moved back in with my mother after her hip surgery, I expected a certain kind of misery. I expected the sharp smell of antiseptic in the bathroom and the bitter smell of medicine in the kitchen. I expected pill bottles lined up on the counter beside half-drunk glasses of water. I expected to help her stand up, help her sit down, help her shuffle to the bathroom with one hand gripping the walker and the other gripping my wrist. I expected to help her in and out of the shower. Then both of us pretend it was not humiliating for her to need that kind of help from me. I expected the usual things that come with illness and old age. I expected the house to feel smaller because of it. I did not expect it to feel hungry. The first strange thing I found was under her bed. I was changing her sheets because she could not bend properly yet. And when I pulled the fitted sheet free and leaned down to tuck the clean one in, I noticed something flattened near the wall in the shadow under the bed frame. At first I thought it was a piece of tissue paper, or maybe part of an old dryer sheet. I crouched down, reached under, and picked it up. It was a peach skin. Not a peel curling off in strips, not a pit. Just the soft outer skin of a peach, turned almost completely inside out, and sucked so clean it had gone pale. I remember straightening up slowly and staring at it in my hand. My mother was sitting by the window in the chair I had moved there for her, a blanket over her knees, flipping through one of those thick mail-order catalogs she never actually ordered from. "Mom," I said, holding it up, "why is this under your bed?" She did not even look over at first. "Throw it out," she said. That was all. No surprise, no confusion, no awkward laugh, no attempt to explain why a peach skin was under her bed. Just throw it out. Something about the way she said it bothered me more than the thing itself. I wish I could say I understood then that something was very wrong, but people make excuses for disgusting things long before they admit they are frightening, especially when it comes to family. So I threw it away and told myself she had probably eaten in bed and dropped it, then forgotten. The next morning, I found a used bandage behind the radiator. That was the first moment my stomach really turned. It was one of the dressings from her hip incision. I knew that because I had changed it myself the day before. Her scar ran along the outside of her thigh, red and swollen, held closed by a line of metal staples that made me feel sick if I looked too long. I had taken the old gauze off, wrapped it in tissue, and thrown it away in the bathroom trash. And now there it was behind the radiator in her room, unwrapped, damp in the middle. One corner pressed flat with little half-moon bite marks as if something had chewed on it. I stood there too long holding it between two fingers, looking at it and trying to force some reasonable explanation into existence. "Mom," I said, louder this time, "what the hell is this doing in here?" She looked at the bandage, then she looked at me. At the time, I thought her expression meant confusion. I thought maybe the medication was making her foggy, Or maybe she was embarrassed and did not know what to say. It took me another week to realize it was not confusion at all. It was shame. "I don't know," she said quietly. "This came off your leg. So throw it out." Again. That phrase again. Not "let me see that." Not "that's strange." Not "how did that get there?" Just get rid of it. By then I had only been back in the house for 10 days. 10 days of measuring out pills and helping her into bed and washing her hair in the sink because she could not stand in the shower long enough for a proper one. 10 days of hearing her thank me in short, clipped little bursts, as if gratitude itself offended her. 10 days of sleeping in my old room upstairs and remembering all over again why I had left that house so quickly at 18 and never stayed longer than a holiday after that. My mother had always been proud, but not in the noble way people like to admire. Not graceful, not strong. She was proud in the hard, unpleasant way that makes a person insist they are fine while they are actively falling apart. The kind of pride that turns every kindness into an insult. So at first I told myself that was all this was. Pain medication, age, embarrassment. Maybe she had been hiding snacks in her room and forgetting about them. But the things I kept finding were never random. They were always soft things. Fruit, yogurt, pudding, applesauce, bread crusts gone damp with butter or broth, a banana hidden behind the laundry hamper with small nervous bites all around it, a yogurt cup licked clean and pushed under the bed frame, the cap from her cough syrup bottle with teeth marks around the rim, an empty tube of prescription skin cream flattened from the bottom and ripped open at the end. That one disturbed me almost as much as the bandage. Not because of what it was, because of how it had been used. It had not been squeezed out. It had been opened and eaten. And all of it, every single thing, was found low to the ground, under the bed, behind the radiator, between the nightstand and the wall, in the narrow space beside the laundry hamper. Never on top of the dresser, never on the bedside table, never in a place that suggested an old woman had dropped it and forgotten. It was always near the floor, like whatever was taking it stayed down there, like it did not want to be seen standing up. That was when I started checking her room at night. At first I lied to myself about it. I told myself I was making sure she had water, making sure she had taken the right pills, making sure she had not tried to walk alone and fallen. But after a few nights, I stopped pretending. I was searching. I checked under the bed, behind the dresser, inside the bathroom trash, in the laundry basket, in the nightstand drawers. I started keeping mental notes of what was where and what disappeared. The room itself began to feel wrong in ways I could not explain clearly. It was always warmer than the rest of the house, even when the heat was low. My mother refused to let me crack the window no matter how stale the air got. She kept the television on low through the night, even though she always claimed noise bothered her sleep, and the smell in that room changed after midnight. It did not exactly get stronger, it just felt closer, as if something that should have stayed hidden came forward in the dark. One night, around 1:30 in the morning, I woke up because I heard chewing. At first I thought I was dreaming because the sound was faint and oddly patient, not loud, not frantic, not like a dog tearing into food, just chewing. Wet, slow, regular, chew, pause, chew. It seemed to come through the floorboard from downstairs. I lay in bed completely still, my heart pounding so hard it hurt. Chew. Pause. Chew. Then I got up and stepped into the hallway. The house was dark except for the weak orange glow from the bathroom nightlight downstairs. The moment my foot touched the third stair, the chewing stopped. I stood there listening so hard that my ears started to ring. Then I heard my mother's voice. She was not calling for help. She was not frightened. She was whispering. Too quietly for me to make out words, but in that soft, private tone people use with frightened children, nervous animals, or someone very sick. I went slowly down the rest of the stairs and crossed the hall barefoot. Her bedroom door was open just a couple of inches. The bedside lamp was off now, but enough dim light reached into the room that I could make out her shape, sitting upright on the edge of the bed. She was facing the far wall. Not the room, not the door. The wall behind the bed. One arm was stretched into the darkness. For one insane second, I thought she was praying. Then I saw the spoon in her hand. She was reaching the spoon through a narrow gap between the wardrobe and the wall. Then she made that same soft, soothing sound again, almost like she was trying to comfort something. I felt my whole body go cold. A second later, the spoon came back empty. I do not know if I made a sound or if she sensed me standing there, but she turned her head sharply, and for one raw instant, I saw fear in her face before she hid it. "What are you doing?" I asked. She looked at the spoon, then at me. "Nothing." "What are you feeding?" That question landed. She did not answer. She did not ask what I meant. She did not act confused. She just looked at me the way a child looks at another child who has stumbled onto some secret hiding place. Then she said very quietly, "Go back to bed." I did not sleep at all after that. I sat in the kitchen until morning, listening to the house. The pipes clicked. The refrigerator hummed. The baseboards made little dry sounds as they cooled. But now every noise felt wrong, not because it sounded unnatural, but because I no longer knew which noises belonged to the house and which ones had been hidden inside it all along. In the morning, I moved the wardrobe. My mother tried to stop me, but not by yelling. She pushed herself up with her cane and said, "Don't," in a voice so frightened and tired that for a second I almost listened. Almost. The wardrobe scraped across the hardwood with a terrible dragging sound, and behind it was exactly what part of me had already started to expect: a panel. It had been painted to match the wall. It sat low to the ground, about 2 feet wide, with an old finger hole cut near one side. And the moment I touched it, a smell seeped through the seam. I still do not know the right words for that smell. Hot, damp cloth, old spit, medicine syrup, rotting fruit, skin cream, human waste that had been cleaned but never really cleaned enough. It smelled like a life lived too close to its own mouth. Behind me, my mother said my name once. Just once. In that tired, hopeless voice mothers use when they already know the day is ruined. I opened the panel. There was space behind it. More space than there should have been. Some kind of service gap widened over time into a place a body could fit into, then live in. There were blankets, bowls, a flashlight, pill bottles, fruit pits, old magazines, a bucket, washcloths, a child's plastic plate, 2 spoons, and my mother's missing skin cream. And farther back, in the dimness, there was a shape, curled up, still, breathing. I lifted my phone flashlight. It moved, not like an animal, That would almost have been easier. It moved like a person who had spent too long bent to match the shape of a wall. First a hand touched the plywood floor, palm down, fingers spread carefully. Then a shoulder. Then a head slowly tilting into the light. I saw the hands before I saw the face properly, and somehow that made it worse. They were human hands, thin, chapped, nails bitten down. One wrist had healed crooked long ago and never been set right. Not claws, not paws, not anything I could separate from myself by calling it something else. Then the face lifted fully into the light. And what hit me hardest was not that it looked monstrous. It was that it looked familiar. It wore one of my father's old undershirts, cut down and badly re-sewn at the neck. The hair had been hacked off unevenly. Ointment shone along one side of the neck, where the skin had cracked. One side of the mouth hung wetter than the other. The eyes were adjusted to dimness, not blind, just used to low light. And beneath all of that, horrifyingly intact, was recognition. It looked at me like it knew me. Then my mother said from behind me in a voice so quiet I almost wished I had imagined it, "That's your brother." The room tilted. "No," I said. That was all I had, just that one word. "No." She was crying by then, but not dramatically. Quietly, almost angrily, as if crying itself was another weakness she resented. "His name is Noah," she said. "I don't have a brother." "Yes," she said. "You do." The thing in the wall, Noah, made a small sound then. Not a growl, not a moan. Just a hurt little murmur, trapped at the throat. My mother turned toward him instantly. "It's all right," she said. "It's all right, sweetheart." Sweetheart. That was the moment something inside me split in a new way. A hidden thing in a wall can still be made into horror if you try hard enough. But hearing your mother comfort it with love makes it something worse. "What is he?" I asked. Her face changed immediately, not because she did not understand the question, because she hated me for asking it that way. "He's your brother." "What is he doing in the wall?" This time she closed her eyes before she answered. "Your father wouldn't let them take him." That was the first clear shape of the truth. Not all of it, but enough to kill every easier lie. My father had been the kind of man who believed anything ugly could be solved by keeping it private. He hid shame the way other people hide money. Broken things went to the basement. Bills went in locked drawers. Tears stayed behind bedroom doors. Questions were shut down before they could grow. I had never imagined that his idea of privacy had included a human being. But once that possibility existed, memories began moving around in my head. Not full memories. Pieces. His rule about scraping plates clean and taking food trash outside every night. His anger if I knocked on my mother's bedroom door after 10. The small utility closet nailed shut when I was 8 because he said the pipes had shifted. His insistence that my bedroom door stay open at night. The sounds in the walls always explained away as mice or old pipes or something under the eaves. "You knew enough when you were little," my mother said. I stared at her. "What does that mean?" "You used to leave him food." The room got smaller. "No, you did." "For what?" She looked at the opening in the wall. "Because you heard him crying." And then something came back. Not as a full memory, not in words, just a child's gesture. A paper towel wrapped around sandwich crusts. my small hand sliding it across a kitchen floor toward a dark space. A pause. A soft, wet little sound from the other side. Then running away before I had to think about it too much. I put my hand on the wall to keep myself upright. Noah was still watching me. Not with anger. Not with hunger. Just with a kind of fearful hope I still do not know how to name. "How long?" I asked. My mother answered immediately. "Your whole life." I called Adult Protective Services that morning. Then I called the sheriff's office. I wish I could make that part dramatic, but the truth is, horror does not become grand when officials arrive. It becomes bright and humiliating, fluorescent, clinical. A deputy came, then a county social worker, then an EMT, then more people once they saw the wall. Noah did not come out willingly. He pulled back from strangers and made those same low-damage sounds whenever anyone got too close. He bit one medic badly enough to send blood down the man's wrist. That was when my mother screamed, really screamed. Tried to get out of her chair, nearly fell. The social worker kept saying her name over and over in that careful, professional voice people use when they are trying to keep things from becoming even uglier than they already are. And through all of it, Noah kept looking for her. That was the worst part. Not the smell, not the wall, not the years of bowls and bandages and hidden scraps and damp little traces of a stolen life. The worst part was that he kept looking for her. Not because she had hidden him, because she was still his mother. When they finally got him onto a stretcher and wheeled him through the hall, he turned his head and found me immediately. And with a voice so damaged it barely sounded human, he said my name. Not my name now. The nickname only my family used when I was little. That was when I understood the last part I had been trying not to understand. He did not just know me now. He had known me then. My mother never forgave me. Before they moved her to a rehab facility, she said exactly one thing that still wakes me up some nights. Don't make him feel unwanted again. Again. That word did more damage than almost anything else. Again means there was a first time. Again means some child version of me had already hurt him once. Again means I did not grow up outside the secret. I grew up around it, shaped by it, participating in it without understanding. I cleaned out the house alone that summer. Once you know what a house has really been hiding, every object inside becomes evidence. Every drawer feels like a witness. There were extra cans of peaches in the pantry, duplicate tubes of ointment stuffed in old pharmacy bags, a baby monitor with tape over the speaker light, my father's old undershirts, cut down smaller and folded in the bottom drawer of my mother's dresser, washcloths hidden behind the water heater, scratch marks on the inside of the wall panel, a small stack of children's books in the crawl space with the corners chewed soft, and in a shoebox behind my mother's winter clothes, one Polaroid. 2 boys on a kitchen floor. One was me, maybe 7 years old. The other was smaller, thinner, turned toward me. Not a creature, not a secret, just a child, my brother. I sold a house in August. That sounds clean when I say it now, but it did not feel clean at all. On paper, everything had been documented, opened, photographed, sanitized, sealed. The county had done what counties do, corrected the structure, filed the forms, turned horror into procedure. Paper means nothing. I moved back into my apartment and tried to live normally again. For a while, I almost believed I could. Then one Sunday, I bought peaches. I brought 4 home and set them in a bowl on the counter. I took a shower. When I came back, there were only 3. I stood there dripping water onto the kitchen tile, staring at the bowl. Maybe I had miscounted. Maybe one had rolled somewhere. Maybe I was already worse off than I wanted to admit. Then I heard a sound from the hall closet. My water heater is in there. Old building. Pipes click and knock all the time. This was not that. It was soft. Wet. Chewing. I did not move. I stood there barefoot and half-dressed, staring at the louvered closet door while the sound continued for maybe 5 seconds, maybe 20. Long enough for my body to understand it before my thoughts did. Then it stopped. A second later, something tapped once from inside the closet. Not scratching, not pounding, just one careful tap, like it knew I was there and did not want to scare me. And then, through the slats, I heard a voice trying to say my childhood nickname again. Not clearly, not completely, but close enough. Close enough that my knees nearly gave out. I do not buy peaches anymore. I do not leave food in the sink overnight. I do not shut my bedroom door all the way. And every few nights, no matter how many times I tell myself I imagined it, I still wake up and listen for the sound of somebody chewing in the walls of a place I thought belonged only to me. The worst part is not that I hear it sometimes. The worst part is that a part of me still listens to hear whether it sounds hungry. Story 3. It started with a strange folder on my laptop. I was just trying to clear some storage space. Nothing dramatic. I had too many old downloads, duplicate photos, random documents, and useless folders I had not touched in months. So I sat down one evening and started deleting things one by one. That was when I noticed a folder I didn't recognize. It was called room_cam_archive. At first, I thought it had to be some leftover system file or something connected to a program I had installed without paying attention. Maybe it came with an update. Or maybe I downloaded something by mistake and forgot about it. That happens all the time, so I didn't panic right away. I clicked on it. Inside were video files. A lot of them, they were all labeled with dates, but not recent dates. Some were from a few weeks ago. Some were from months earlier. I just sat there staring at the names, trying to remember if I had ever created anything like that. I hadn't. I was sure of it. I don't record videos on my laptop. I barely use the camera on it at all. My stomach started to feel tight. I clicked one of the files. The video opened, and for the first few seconds, I couldn't understand what I was looking at. It looked familiar, but my brain took a moment to catch up. Then it hit me. It was my room. Not a room like mine. Not something similar. My exact room. The same bed pushed against the wall. The same small table near the window. The same chair with clothes hanging over the back. The same messy corner where I always throw things when I'm too tired to put them away properly. Even the crack in the paint above my bed was visible if I looked closely enough. The angle was wrong, though. It wasn't filmed from my laptop or my phone. It looked like it was being recorded from high up in the corner of the room, near the ceiling, like a hidden CCTV camera had been installed there. I immediately paused the video and looked up at the actual corner of my room. There was nothing there. No camera, no blinking light, no tiny black lens. Nothing except plain white paint and a little dust where the wall met the ceiling. My heart started beating faster. I looked back at the screen and played the video again. There I was, walking into my room. I closed the door, sat on the bed, picked up my phone, and started scrolling. That was it. Nothing dramatic happened. No weird shadow, no jump scare. Just me in my room, exactly as I had been that day, and somehow that made it even worse, because it meant that the video was real. I checked another file. Same room, same angle, a different day. In that one, I came in carrying a bag, dropped it by the door, changed my shirt, and left again a few minutes later. I opened another. It showed me asleep. I opened another. I was sitting on the bed doing absolutely nothing, just staring at the floor like I sometimes do when I'm tired or thinking too much. I kept opening more. Every single one showed my room from that same impossible angle. Different times, different dates, different lighting. Everything looked real. Too real. There were details in those videos that nobody could have guessed or recreated, unless they had really seen my room exactly as it was. The curtain moving slightly because of the fan. My shoes left near the door at an angle I would never have noticed on my own. A glass of water half under the bed. A shirt hanging out of the laundry basket. Tiny, ordinary details that made the whole thing impossible to dismiss. I kept trying to explain it to myself. Maybe someone had hacked my laptop. Maybe this was some kind of virus. Maybe it was fake footage made to scare me. But none of those explanations worked. If it was fake, it was impossibly detailed. If it was hacked, that still didn't explain where the footage came from. And if there really was a camera in my room, then where was it? I got up from my desk and searched everything. I checked the corners of the ceiling. I checked behind the curtain rod. I looked at the smoke detector, the bookshelf, the lamp, the air vent, even the little screw holes in the wall. I got so paranoid that I turned off the lights and used my phone flashlight, thinking maybe I would catch some hidden lens reflecting back at me. Nothing. I searched for nearly 20 minutes and found absolutely nothing. By then I was already scared, but I was also too deep into it to stop. So I went back to the folder. I opened a file dated 3 nights earlier. I remember hesitating before clicking play. Part of me didn't want to see anymore, but curiosity was stronger than fear in that moment. I told myself there had to be some answer in the later files. Some clue, some mistake, something that would make it all make sense. The video started. It was nighttime. My room was dark except for a little light coming through the window from outside. I was asleep in bed, lying on my side, facing the wall. At first, nothing looked unusual. I watched for maybe a minute, maybe more. I nearly convinced myself that this file would be just like the others, creepy only because it existed, not because of anything happening in it. Then I noticed movement, not from me. From the corner of the room, I leaned closer to the screen. At first it looked like a shadow shifting along the wall, but it didn't move like a normal shadow. It stretched slowly, too smoothly, as if something was stepping into the frame from somewhere the camera couldn't fully capture. I stared at it, barely breathing. The shape got longer, taller. It slid across the wall and toward the bed. My whole body went cold. There was nothing in my room that could cast that shape. No coat hanging there, no lamp moving, no car headlights from outside. The angle was wrong for all of that. And even if it had been caused by a light source, shadows don't move like that. Not slowly and deliberately. Not like they know where they're going. The shape stopped beside my bed. I watched myself sleeping in the video, completely unaware. Then the shadow seemed to thicken. I don't know how else to describe it. It was still dark, still unclear, but it no longer looked flat. It started to feel like an actual figure standing there, just barely outside the range of what the camera could fully show. Tall, thin, wrong in a way that made my skin prickle. It leaned forward slightly, as if it was looking at me, at the sleeping version of me in the bed. I paused the video. I had to. My chest hurt. My hands were freezing cold, but sweating at the same time. I turned around in my chair and looked at my room again. The bed, the wall, the corner. Everything was normal. Still, silent. But it no longer felt empty. That was the worst part. Before, I had only been scared by what I was seeing on the laptop. Now the room itself felt different. Like the video had changed something. Like watching it had made me aware of something that had always been there. I almost shut the laptop right then. I almost deleted the folder without watching the rest. But I needed to know what happened next. So I turned back and pressed play. The figure remained beside the bed for a few seconds. Then, very slowly, it raised what looked like an arm. I felt my stomach drop. The movement was too careful, too controlled. It was not random. It was not a glitch. It was reaching. Its hand, or whatever shape served as a hand, moved toward my face while I slept. I stopped breathing. I was so focused on the screen that I didn't even realize I had gripped the edge of the desk until my fingers started hurting. The figure's hand moved closer, closer, and just before it touched my face, the video glitched. The screen exploded into static. White noise, broken lines, distorted sound. For a few seconds, I couldn't see anything clearly at all. Then the video returned to normal. My room looked the same. I was still asleep in bed, but the figure was gone. Just gone. No movement away, no fade, no shadow crossing back out of frame. It had simply vanished during the static. I sat back in my chair and stared at the screen, trying to process what I had just watched. My hands were shaking so badly now that I had to place them in my lap to stop them from trembling in front of me. I kept telling myself the same thing. It had to be fake. It had to be edited. It had to be some horrible prank. But the deeper part of me, the part that reacts before logic gets involved, already knew that was not true. I went back into the folder. That was when I noticed one last file. Unlike the others, it didn't have an older date. It had today's date. I froze. For a moment, I just stared at the file name. I had not recorded anything today. There was absolutely no reason that file should exist. Slowly, with a hand that didn't feel steady anymore, I clicked on it. The video loaded instantly. Same room, same angle, same impossible camera position near the ceiling. At first, the bed was empty. I frowned at the screen, confused. Then I realized why. Because I wasn't in the bed. I was at my desk, watching the video. The camera was recording in real time. For a second, I couldn't move at all. I saw myself on the screen from behind, sitting exactly the way I was sitting in that moment. The laptop was open. My shoulders were tense. Even the slight tilt of my head matched what I was doing right then. My body went completely cold. Very slowly, I turned my head and looked up toward the corner where the camera should have been. Nothing. Still nothing. Just the same blank corner. Then I turned back to the screen. Something had changed. Behind me, in the video near the wall, a dark shape had appeared. It wasn't fully formed yet. It was like watching a stain spread through water, slowly gathering itself into a human outline. Tall, thin, too still at first, then not still at all. It was standing there, watching me. Watching the version of me sitting at the desk. For one horrible second, I didn't know which was worse. The thing in the video, or the possibility that it might actually be behind me in the room. I couldn't make myself turn around again. I just stared at the screen. The figure became clearer, though never fully clear. It remained more shadow than body. But there was shape enough to understand where its head was, where its shoulders were, where one arm hung too long at its side. Then it moved, not quickly. That would have almost been easier. It took one slow step closer to the desk, then another. Each movement was smooth and silent. On the screen, it was getting closer to my back. I could see myself still sitting there, frozen, just like I was frozen in real life. I watched my own shoulders stiffen in the video before I consciously felt myself do it. That made me realize the delay between what was happening and what I was seeing was nearly nothing. This was live. Oh, or close enough to live that it did not matter. I wanted to slam the laptop shut, but I couldn't. I wanted to run, but the door was behind me, and I couldn't stop thinking about the thing standing between me and the wall, between me and everything I thought I understood about that room. On the screen, the figure was now directly behind my chair, its head tilted slightly, like it was curious, like it had been waiting for me to notice it properly. I finally forced myself to move. I grabbed the laptop and spun around so fast the chair nearly tipped over. There was nothing behind me. Nothing. Just the wall, the edge of the bed, my backpack on the floor, my hoodie hanging from the chair behind the door. The room looked completely normal. I stared at the empty space, breathing hard, then looked back down at the laptop. In the video, the figure was still there, still behind me. Except now, on the screen, it was bending down, leaning closer to where my neck should have been. That broke something in me. I threw the laptop shut so hard it almost slipped out of my hands, pushed the chair back, and stumbled away from the desk. For a few seconds, I just stood there, in the middle of the room, unable to decide what to do next. My brain was running in circles. Leave the room, leave the apartment, smash the laptop, open it again, call someone. Don't call anyone, because what would I even say? I backed toward the door without taking my eyes off the corners of the room. Nothing moved, nothing breathed, nothing made a sound. I opened the door and stepped into the hallway, then shut it behind me so hard the frame shook. I stood there outside my own room, listening. Silence. After maybe a minute, I realized I was still holding my breath. I spent the rest of that night on the couch in the living room with every light on. I did not go back into my room. I did not open the laptop again. At some point near morning, I convinced myself that daylight would make it feel stupid, that everything would look different once the sun was up. But even then, I could not bring myself to relax. When morning finally came, I opened the laptop again. The folder was gone, not hidden, gone. I searched for it manually. Nothing. I checked recent files. Nothing. I searched the recycle bin. Nothing. It was as if room_cam_archive had never existed. If that had been the only strange part, Maybe I could have convinced myself I had imagined everything from stress or lack of sleep. But my room was different. Not in a big, obvious way, in small ways. The chair at my desk was angled differently than I remembered. My blanket on the bed was slightly pulled down at one corner, and on the wall near the bed, where nothing had been before, there was a faint dark mark. Long, thin, almost like the shape of fingers dragged lightly downward. I moved out 2 weeks later. I told everyone it was because the building felt unsafe, which was true, just not in a way they would understand. I never found a camera. I never found the folder again. I never got proof that could make sense to another person. But I still think about those videos, especially the last one. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I had kept watching. Sometimes I wonder if the thing on the screen was delayed by a few seconds, or if it was ahead of me. And sometimes, when I open my laptop and the screen stays black for a moment before lighting up, I catch myself staring at my reflection and checking the space behind me first. Story 4. About 10 years ago, my grandfather died in a hospital room with most of the family gathered around him. I still remember the smell of the place, that mix of disinfectant and stale air, and the way everyone tried to keep themselves together because there was nothing else left to do. I stood close to his bed while the others lingered nearby, speaking in hushed voices or wiping at their faces. He looked weak, barely present, like his body had already started giving up before the final moment came. Then, just before he died, he turned slightly toward me and whispered something directly into my ear. "You are a pig, consuming, absorbing, destroying." I pulled back from him immediately, stunned and confused. For a moment I thought I had misheard him. I looked around the room, expecting someone else to react, but nobody seemed to have heard what he said. My sister Kate caught my eye from across the room. She looked exhausted and tearful, and when I gave her a confused look, she only shrugged like she had no idea what had just happened either. I didn't say anything then. It didn't feel like the right moment. Everyone was emotional already. And the last thing I wanted was to repeat something so cruel and strange in the middle of all that grief. After some time, Kate and I left the room to get food downstairs at the hospital Wendy's. It was something we had done before during long hospital visits. There was something pathetic and comforting about eating junk food in a place like that. Maybe it was just an easy distraction. By the time we sat down with our food, I realized how hungry I felt. Not normal hunger either. More like I had suddenly become aware of an empty space inside me that needed to be filled right away. I bit into my burger hard and fast, barely tasting it. Across from me, Kate was unwrapping hers, watching me with tired eyes. After a minute, she asked, "What did he whisper to you?" I hesitated. Part of me still wanted to keep it to myself. It sounded awful. It sounded insane. I didn't want to upset anyone with dying words that made no sense. But Kate was the one person I felt I could tell honestly. So I did. I repeated the exact words as quietly as I could. At first, she thought I was joking. When she realized I wasn't, the expression on her face changed. She stopped chewing and just stared at me. I explained that I didn't know why he said it, that I hadn't done anything, that as far as I knew there was no reason for him to say something like that. She nodded, but she looked unsettled. I could tell it bothered her. Neither of us had an explanation. Our grandfather had been difficult at times, but this wasn't like him. The words felt too specific, too ugly, too deliberate. Kate tore through the rest of her burger while I kept eating fries and trying not to think too hard about it. We ended up sitting there in an uncomfortable silence before heading back upstairs. Over the next few days, something started changing in me. At first, it was small enough that I could ignore it. I would eat a little more than usual at lunch. I'd make extra rice at dinner or snack more often between meals. But it didn't stop there. Every day, the hunger got worse. It kept growing, stretching itself inside me, making every meal feel too small before I even finished it. Within just a few days, I had gone through all the groceries in my apartment. That was not normal for me at all. I usually made food last. I wasn't the kind of person who constantly snacked or overeaten until I was sick. But now I never felt full. That was the strangest part. I could eat 2 full meals back to back and still feel empty, like the food was disappearing into some pit inside me without touching the sides. The hunger stopped feeling like a normal body signal and became something sharper, something meaner. It sat low under my ribs and pulsed there, a deep, aching need that wouldn't go away no matter what I ate. It got hard to focus at work. I would sit at my desk or stand in the break room, and all I could think about was food. My stomach felt hollow and furious. One afternoon at work, I opened the break room fridge and saw one of my co-workers' meal containers sitting on a shelf. I knew it wasn't mine. I knew exactly what I was doing. But in that moment, none of that seemed to matter. My mouth filled with saliva. My hands shook. I pulled it out, opened it, and devoured the whole thing in minutes. I should have felt guilty. I didn't. I was still starving. There was a plastic spoon in the container, and before I even really understood what I was doing, I had shoved it into my mouth and bitten down. It cracked between my teeth. I kept chewing. Piece after piece broke apart, sharp and ugly. But I swallowed them anyway. I don't know how long it took before I snapped out of it, but when I did, the spoon was gone. I stood there frozen, staring at the empty container in my hand. Then I went to the bathroom and looked at myself in the mirror. There was blood around my gums. I remember gripping the sink and whispering, "What the hell is wrong with me?" I was disgusted. I was horrified. And none of that stopped me. Over the next day or so, it got even worse. I started eating things that weren't food at all. More plastic spoons, plastic forks, a paper plate, brown napkins, a bottle cap. In the middle of one night, half asleep and panicked with hunger, I tore off part of my pillow and shoved the stuffing into my mouth. There was no pleasure in it, not exactly. Just relief. Brief, pathetic relief that vanished almost immediately and left me desperate again. The next morning, I had plans to go to the beach with some friends. I had agreed to it a week earlier, before all of this got so bad. I thought maybe getting out of the apartment would help distract me. Maybe being around people would make me feel normal again. I didn't want to admit how badly I was losing control. We got there, laid out towels, unpacked drinks and snacks, and settled in. I tried to act fine, but the pain in my stomach was so bad that I barely moved from my towel. I told everyone I wasn't in the mood to swim yet. At some point, I smelled something. Meat. The scent was so strong it cut through everything else around me: salt air, sunscreen, ocean water, heat. I turned toward the group of people sitting a little to my right, They were eating something red in chunks with their hands. At first glance, I thought it had to be meat. I stared at it, trying to understand why it smelled that way. Then I realized it was watermelon. That made no sense. I kept staring anyway. The smell of meat got stronger. My mouth began to water so badly that I had to swallow over and over. Then, in one of the most disturbing moments of my life, I understood what I was actually smelling. Not the fruit. Them. Their bodies. Their warm skin under the sun. The sweat on their arms and necks. The smell was coming from them, and once my mind made that connection, I couldn't undo it. I looked at their bare shoulders, their glistening backs, the curve of muscle in their legs, and I thought about eating them. The thought landed in me with terrifying clarity. I needed to eat. To stop myself, I plunged my fingers into the sand beside me and grabbed a fistful. It was warm and gritty. I could feel the tiny grains grinding against my skin. Before I gave myself a chance to think better of it, I shoved it into my mouth. The relief was instant. I don't know how to explain that without sounding insane, but it was. The warmth, the texture, the weight of it entering my mouth and pressing against my tongue felt almost soothing. I chewed slowly, feeling sand scrape across my teeth and pack into the corners of my mouth. Then I grabbed more and shoved that in too. I swallowed. The sand stuck in my throat and made it hard to breathe, but I kept going. The dry heat of it, the heaviness as it dropped into my stomach, gave me a terrible sense of satisfaction. I sat there, staring at the people next to me, imagining tearing into them the same way I was tearing into the beach itself. I don't know how long I was in that state. One of my friends came running back toward our spot, and the sudden movement broke whatever trance I had fallen into. I quickly wiped my mouth and face, trying to hide what I had done, but the damage was already done. My throat burned. I was painfully thirsty. I could barely speak. I chugged an entire bottle of water in seconds, got up, and left the beach without explaining myself properly. Back at my apartment, I drank more water and shoved every bit of food I had left into my mouth. It didn't matter. The sand sat in my stomach like hot stones, but the hunger remained. It was always there, beneath everything else, like a second heartbeat. I knew I couldn't keep doing that. I knew I was getting worse. What terrified me most was not even the things I had already eaten. It was the fact that I had looked at people and imagined eating them too. That thought stayed with me. It hung over everything. I didn't trust myself. After a long stretch of pacing around my apartment, I came up with an idea. It wasn't smart, but by then I wasn't thinking clearly. I soaked a dish rag in rubbing alcohol, balled it up, and shoved it into my mouth. The taste and fumes were so strong they made me gag immediately. My eyes watered. I could barely breathe through my nose, but it worked, at least a little. The smell was so disgusting that it pushed the hunger back. I tied another rag around my face to keep the alcohol-soaked one in place. I must have looked completely insane, pacing around my apartment with a rag tied over my mouth like that. Still, it helped enough for me to think. And once I started thinking, one idea came back stronger than anything else. My grandfather's words. You are a pig. Consuming, absorbing, destroying. I wasn't the only one who had heard about those words. Kate knew. At Wendy's, I had repeated them to her exactly. The thought hit me hard and fast. If whatever was happening to me had anything to do with what he said, then maybe it could be happening to her too. I called her right away. No answer. I called again. Still nothing. Then I called my parents, since she was living with them. No answer there either. At that point, a heavy dread settled over me. I grabbed my keys and drove to my parents' house. By the time I got there, it was early evening. I let myself in with the spare key they kept under the doormat. The moment I stepped inside, I knew something was wrong. The house was quiet in a way that didn't feel natural. The lights were on, but there were no voices, no television, no footsteps. Just stillness. I moved into the living room and saw blood on the carpet. Not a small amount. Not something you could explain away. Blood was splattered and smeared across the floor, with a trail dragging away toward the kitchen. My stomach twisted, though not in the way it should have. Fear rose in me, yes, but under it all the hunger remained, ugly and alive. I followed the blood trail anyway, each step feeling heavier than the last. By the time I reached the kitchen, the metallic smell hit me even through the alcohol rag in my mouth. It was thick and unmistakable. The blood had pooled on the floor near the kitchen island. At first, all I could see was a foot sticking out from behind it. Then I moved around the island. What I found barely looked like a body. The foot was attached to part of a lower leg, torn unevenly at the end. Bone stuck out from the muscle in jagged white pieces. Around it were chunks of flesh, bits of clothing, smashed bone, and tissue so torn apart that I couldn't tell whose it had been. I dropped to my knees and gagged. Sand rose in my throat, and I forced it back down. I still don't know who it was. I stood there shaking, blood soaking into my shoes, and saw another trail leading out of the kitchen. Bare footprints this time. Bloody footprints heading down the hall toward Kate's room. I followed them because I had to. When I reached her door, I hesitated with my hand on the knob. I bit down on the alcohol rag and turned it. Locked. I twisted it again, harder, then again. Panic and adrenaline surged through me. I backed up and slammed my shoulder into the door. It barely moved. I hit it again, and again. I kicked at it, rammed it, threw myself into it until the wood around the lock cracked. After several minutes of that, the door finally gave way and crashed inward, sending me stumbling into the room. It was destroyed. There is no better word for it. Everything had been ripped apart, furniture overturned, clothes shredded, trash and broken objects everywhere. The carpet was soaked in blood. Parts of the room looked torn open by hands, while other parts looked chewed or smashed. The whole place felt like the aftermath of an animal attack, except worse, because some of the destruction was too deliberate. At first I didn't see Kate. Then I noticed the closet. The door was open. She was on the floor inside, slumped back against hanging clothes, sitting in a pool of blood. One hand was wrapped around something pink and soft-looking. Her jaw hung loosely open, and there was blood and flesh around her mouth. I ran to her and grabbed her by the shoulders, and when I moved her, her head tilted enough for me to see the back of it. A large section of the top back of her skull was gone. It looked as if it had been pried open. The brain underneath had been torn apart. I crawled away from her in complete terror. I couldn't breathe properly. My whole vision narrowed until all I could see was her body and that impossible wound. I kept thinking, what has she done? What happened here? Had she done this to the others? Had she done that to herself? Had whatever was happening to me taken her over first? I ran. I stumbled out of the room, out of the house, and into my car. I called the police, but with the rag in my mouth and the panic taking over, I couldn't make myself speak properly. I drove away almost immediately after placing the call. I've been hiding in my apartment for the past few hours, writing this instead of doing anything else. And the truth is, I'm not hiding because I'm afraid the police will blame me. I'm hiding because even after everything I saw, even after the blood and the torn bodies and Kate in that closet, even through the alcohol rag, my stomach is still rumbling, my mouth still waters. The smell of blood in that house made me sick with fear, but underneath that fear was something worse. Hunger. Constant, violent hunger. I don't trust myself to be near anyone. I don't trust what might happen if this gets worse. And the most horrifying part is that despite everything, despite seeing what this did to Kate, despite knowing what it might do to me next, one thought keeps rising above all the others and crushing them down. I'm dying to eat. Story 5. I want to make one thing clear before I say anything else. I am not the kind of person who scares easily. I do not check the locks over and over before bed. I do not believe in ghosts. I have never been one of those people who thinks something is hiding in the dark or watching from the corner of a room. I have always trusted simple explanations. If something makes a strange sound, I assume there is a reason. If something looks odd, I assume I am tired or distracted. That is the kind of person I have always been. That is why I need to write this all down now, while I still can before I talk myself into believing none of it is real. About 3 weeks ago, I noticed something small and stupid. It was the smoke detector in the hallway outside my bedroom. You know how they all blink every so often, just one little red light every half minute or so, enough to show you the battery is still working. Mine had done that for the entire 2 years I had lived in this apartment. It was steady and ordinary, the kind of thing you stop noticing because it becomes part of the background. Then, on March 3rd, it changed. Instead of one steady blink, it started flashing in groups. 2 fast blinks, a pause, 3 quick blinks, another pause, then 1 longer blink. It was not regular anymore. It felt organized. I stood in the hallway and watched it for a while, maybe 5 minutes or a little more, trying to understand what was wrong with it. Eventually, I decided it was probably just a battery problem. I told myself I would replace it over the weekend, and then I went to bed. The next night, I noticed it again. Same grouped flashes, same feeling of rhythm. The pattern was not exactly the same as the night before, but it was clearly not random either. I should explain something here because it matters. I am an amateur radio hobbyist. I got into it in college for a stupid reason, honestly. A girl I liked was into it, so I learned it to impress her, and then I kept the hobby long after she was gone. Because of that, I know Morse code. I am not some expert who hears it fluently in my sleep, but I know enough that my brain still recognizes it when it shows up. I was not thinking about Morse code when I stood there watching the detector. But after a little while, my mind started making the connection on its own. The same way you start reading subtitles automatically, even when you understand the language being spoken. I was just watching the light, And suddenly I realized the blinks were not random at all. They were spelling my name, my full first name, 7 letters. Then it repeated it. Then again, 3 times in total, followed by a pause, and then the whole thing started over. I stood in the hallway at 11 at night, staring at a smoke detector that was blinking my name at me, and I wish I could say I felt pure fear right away. But that is not true. What I really felt at first was embarrassment. I felt stupid. I felt like the kind of person who sees faces in wallpaper and thinks they mean something. I told myself I was forcing meaning onto nonsense. Human beings are good at that. We find patterns everywhere. We turn noise into signal because our brains are built that way. So I ignored it and went to bed. The next night, I decided to test it. I set up my phone to record the detector while I slept. I left it running from midnight until 6 in the morning. When I woke up, I made coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and played the footage back at double speed. I kept a notebook beside me and started writing down the flashes. From midnight until 1:15, the detector blinked my name on a loop. From 1:15 until 3:40, it blinked a different message. I can see you from here. I wrote it down, stared at it, then kept going because I needed to know whether I was somehow making a mistake. From 3:40 until 5:55, it changed again. You look different when you sleep. I read those words over and over until they stopped looking like language and started looking like the scribbling of someone losing their mind. My hands were not shaking in the usual way people describe fear. They were vibrating. It was a small, fast trembling, like my bones themselves were humming. I took the detector down from the ceiling immediately. It was an ordinary battery-powered unit. Nothing smart, nothing connected to Wi-Fi, nothing fancy. Just plastic, a battery compartment, and a red light. I opened it, removed the battery, and set it on the kitchen counter. The red light blinked once, just once. No battery, no power, no reason for it to do anything at all. I stared at it for 10 straight minutes after that, waiting for another flash, but there was nothing. Only that one impossible blink. I took it outside and threw it into the dumpster behind the building. The next morning, I bought a brand new smoke detector from the hardware store. I brought it home, installed it, tested it, checked the battery, and for the rest of that day I felt ridiculous for how relieved I was. The new detector blinked normally, one steady pulse every so often, exactly like it should. That feeling lasted until 1 in the morning. That was when the grouped flashes began again. I did not even need the notebook at first because the message was so short. You threw me away. I stood there in the hallway in the dark, my phone flashlight pointed at the ceiling, writing it down as it happened. Before I could even decide what to think, the detector continued. You threw me away, but I'm not in the detector. Then another pause. I'm in the ceiling. Another pause. I've always been in the ceiling. The detector is just how I talk to you. I stopped writing. I just stood there with my head tilted back, staring at the ceiling. It was normal drywall, painted that same dull off-white color every apartment uses. There was an old water stain near the bathroom from a leak the landlord had fixed before I moved in. I had seen it 1,000 times and never thought about it. There was nothing up there that looked unusual, nothing that should have made those messages possible. Then the detector blinked again. Don't take this one down. A pause. It's dark up here without the light, and I need to see you to make sure you're still safe. That sentence did something to me. Everything before it was scary, yes, but it was the kind of scary I could understand. Something knows my name. Something can see me. Something watches me sleep. Those are threats. Threats make sense. If something wants to hurt you, your mind knows where to put that fear. But this was different. It sounded protective, gentle almost. Not angry that I had thrown the other detector away, but worried that without the blinking light, it could not watch over me properly. That frightened me more than anything else. I did not know what to do with the idea of something inside my ceiling that thought it was keeping me safe. The next day, I bought a small webcam and set it on a bookshelf in the living room so it aimed down the hall toward the detector. I let it record through the night. When I reviewed the footage the next morning, I was not paying attention to the messages. I was watching the detector itself. At 3:47 in the morning, the blinking stopped. For exactly 11 seconds, the red light stayed solid. And in that steady red glow pressed flat against the ceiling around the detector, there was a face. I need to be very careful describing it because this is the point where everything in me wants to call it an illusion. But I know what I saw. It was not behind the ceiling in some vague way. It looked pressed against the surface from above as if the drywall were glass and someone had lowered their face onto it. The features were flattened and spread wider than they should have been, the way a child presses their face to a car window. But the proportions were wrong, too broad, too stretched. The mouth was longer than it should have been. The cheeks looked compressed, and it was staring straight down through the area around the detector into the hallway. I paused the video. I zoomed in. And then I realized the face was mine. Not similar. Not familiar. Mine. The same forehead. The same nose. The same scar above my left eyebrow from when I was 12 years old and fell off my bike. It was my face, exactly. But wearing an expression I have never worn in my life. It looked hungry, not angry, not violent in any simple way, just hungry in a deep, patient, miserable way, like it had been waiting without food for years. And it was smiling. I have not slept in my bedroom since seeing that footage. I dragged my mattress into the living room and started sleeping there instead. The smoke detector in the living room blinked normally. No strange rhythm. No messages. Nothing unusual. Every night I lay there watching it anyway, checking it again and again, waiting for the grouped flashes to start. For several nights they did not. Then last night, at around 2 in the morning, I woke up and looked at the detector above me. It blinked once. Not in the normal pattern, just once. A little out of rhythm. Then it stopped and went back to normal. I lay there in the dark for the next 3 hours, staring at it without moving, waiting for another cluster, another message, another sign that whatever was in the hallway ceiling had crossed into the living room. Nothing else happened. This morning, I found a crack in the living room ceiling. It was small, thin, easy to miss unless you were already looking for problems. I tried to tell myself it had always been there. That old apartments settle. That paint dries and shifts. That ceilings crack all the time. But I know it was not there yesterday. I keep repeating to myself that it is just a crack. But I do not believe that anymore. The hallway detector is still blinking in groups. I can see it from where I am sitting right now. I told myself I was not going to translate it anymore. I promised myself that if I stopped giving it attention, maybe it would stop. Maybe it needed response. Maybe it needed recognition. Maybe understanding it was the same as feeding it somehow. So I tried not to translate it. But that lasted only until I saw the rhythm of my own name again. You learn the shape of your own name faster than you expect. Even without writing it down, I knew what it was saying. The pattern is familiar now. It flashes my name over and over, patiently, like someone calling from another room. The crack in the living room ceiling is longer now. This morning, it measured 4 inches. I checked it with the ruler because I needed to prove to myself that I was not imagining it. Just now I measured it again, 4.5. I am trying to think of rational explanations, and they all sound absurd in their own way. Maybe someone wired something into the detector somehow. Maybe I'm sleep-deprived and hallucinating. Maybe the video glitched. Maybe the crack is stress damage and the rest is anxiety spiraling into nonsense. But every explanation breaks apart under the weight of one detail or another. The detector blinked without a battery. The new one knew I had thrown the old one away. The face on the footage was mine. The crack is growing. I do not know what to do with that. I cannot call my landlord and tell him there is something in the ceiling using the smoke detectors to talk to me. I cannot explain that I filmed my own face, pressing out of the drywall from the wrong side. I cannot say that it sounds protective, that it claims it needs to see me to keep me safe. There is no version of that conversation that ends with anyone treating me like a sane person. And yet I also cannot stay here pretending none of this matters. I moved rooms to get away from it, and it followed. At first, the thought that it was imitating me was bad enough. But now I am starting to think imitation is not the right word. It is not copying me because it wants to look like me. It is becoming me, or trying to. And whatever part of it is still unfinished seems to be trapped above the ceiling, pressing down into the shape it thinks it should have. That thought keeps making me look up. I have covered the living room detector with a towel twice now, and each time I end up pulling the towel down because I cannot stand not seeing it. The blinking feels horrible, but not seeing it feels worse. I keep thinking that if it stops and I miss the moment it changes, I will lose whatever warning I still have. I have also started noticing other things. At night, the apartment sounds different. I used to know all the usual noises: pipes knocking, neighbors walking above me, the hum of old wiring, the little settling creaks of the building after midnight. Now there is something else. Soft, almost too soft to hear clearly. A shifting overhead. Not footsteps exactly. More like weight adjusting itself slowly. Like something lying flat and moving just enough to get comfortable. Every time I hear it, I freeze. I hold my breath and listen until my chest aches. Sometimes I tell myself it is the upstairs unit. Sometimes I tell myself the pipes are carrying sound strangely. But the noises do not match those explanations. They are too slow, too deliberate, too close. The kind of sounds that make you feel like the space above your head is occupied. Twice now, I have caught myself about to whisper, "I'm still here." I do not know why. Maybe because whatever it is sounds so patient. Maybe because some terrible part of me wants to keep it calm. If it thinks it is protecting me, then perhaps the safest thing is not to upset it. That thought disgusts me, but it keeps coming back. I tried inviting a friend over yesterday just to prove to myself that I was not trapped in this alone. I nearly sent the message 3 different times and then deleted it every time. What was I supposed to say? Come sit in my living room while I wait for my ceiling to split open? Come tell me whether the detector blinking my name sounds strange to you too? I imagined someone else hearing the messages, seeing the crack, seeing the footage, and even in my imagination, they looked at me with that careful expression people use when they think you are fragile. So I stayed alone. That might have been a mistake, because being alone with this has made me notice too much. The hallway detector does not just blink in groups now. Sometimes it goes completely still for a few seconds before continuing, as though it is listening. The crack in the living room ceiling does not run straight. It curves very slightly, like something underneath it is testing where the surface is weakest. And when I stand directly under it, the air feels cooler, not dramatically, just enough that I become aware of the skin on my scalp and shoulders. A little while ago, I made the mistake of watching the hallway footage again. I told myself I was checking for details I missed the first time. I zoomed in on the face frame by frame. The longer I stared, the more wrong it looked. Not because it wasn't mine, but because it was too carefully mine. Every detail was exact, but the way it held those details together felt rehearsed, like someone had studied my face in pieces and then assembled them without fully understanding what makes an expression human. The smile is what gets me the most. It is wide, but not in a cartoonish way. Not monstrous in the simple sense. It is a starving smile, an exhausted smile. The smile of something that believes food is close enough to taste. It looks loving and famished at the same time. And the eyes are not the eyes of someone trying to scare me. They are the eyes of someone waiting. I think that is why I finally started writing all this down. Because once I admitted to myself that it was waiting, everything else changed. A threat that wants to attack right away is one kind of fear. A thing that watches you patiently, room by room, crack by crack, learning the shape of you while believing it is caring for you. That is something else entirely. I do not think it wants to break in. I think it wants to arrive correctly. That is why the crack matters. That is why the face is still in the ceiling instead of standing in my living room already. Whatever is up there is making its way toward me carefully. And I have this horrible feeling that when it finally comes through, it will not look exactly like me anymore. It will have passed some point of imitation by then. It will be what was hidden behind the blinking lights all along. The detector in the hallway just flashed again while I was writing this. Not my name this time. I know because the rhythm was too short. I told myself I would not translate it. I told myself I would stop. But my brain did it anyway, quick and automatic before I could block it. Almost. That was all it said. I keep looking at the crack in the living room ceiling. It is wider now than it was when I started typing. Not much, but enough that I can see the edge of shadow inside it. It is not deep, at least not in the normal sense. It looks more like the crack opens into darkness too quickly, as if there should be insulation or wood or something solid behind it. and instead there is only black. I do not know whether I should leave. A rational person would say yes. Grab a bag, walk out, go to a hotel, go to a friend's house, call someone, anything. But another part of me keeps thinking the same terrible thought. If I leave, will it follow me there too? If it is in the detectors, in the ceiling, in the spaces above me, what exactly am I leaving behind? The apartment? Or only the illusion that it is attached to a place and not to me? That is the other thing I cannot shake. The messages are personal. They are not random words. They are about me. My name, my sleep, my safety, my movements from room to room. It knows when I am under it and when I am not. It noticed when I threw one detector away. It noticed when I moved my mattress. I do not think I am dealing with a haunted apartment. I think I am being watched by something that has chosen me specifically. And I do not know why. If I stop writing for too long, I start listening again. And listening makes everything worse. The apartment is too quiet now. Even the city noise from outside seems far away. The only sounds are the tiny electrical clicks of the hallway detector, and, every so often, the faint dry sound above me, like a hand or cheek or forehead adjusting against the other side of the ceiling. I have not looked directly above the crack in several minutes, because I am afraid of what I will see if the plaster gives way just enough. I am trying very hard to keep this account clear and simple, because I know how it sounds. I know that if someone else wrote this, I would think they were having some kind of breakdown. But the video exists. The crack exists. The detector is blinking right now. I could hold up a camera and prove at least part of this if I wanted to. I just do not know whether proving it would help me. The hallway detector flashed my name again. Then a pause. Then something longer. I translated it before I meant to. Don't be afraid. That was followed by another message. I'm almost through. The crack made a small sound just then. A dry little tick, like fingernail against eggshell. I stood up so fast the chair tipped over behind me. There is dust on the floor now beneath the crack. White powder. Fresh. I think I have reached the point where writing this down is no longer about convincing myself. It is about leaving a record in case anyone finds this place after. Because I can admit something now that I did not want to admit when I began. I do not think the ceiling's going to hold. And I do not think what comes through is going to be me, even if it still wears my face when it first appears. It has been watching too long, smiling too long, waiting too long. If you find this and the detectors in your place ever start blinking in groups, do not watch them long enough to learn the rhythm. Do not record them overnight. Do not answer them in any way, even silently. Do not assume replacing the unit will help. Do not look at footage frame by frame if you think something is pressing from the other side. And if a crack appears in the ceiling above wherever you move to feel safe, leave before you measure it the second time. I can hear something above the living room now, not shifting, dragging, slowly, directly over me. The hallway light just blinked solid red for a second, and from where I'm sitting, I could see the shadow of a face spreading around it on the ceiling. My face, smiling. The crack just widened enough for something dark and wet to show through. I'm going to stop writing now. Story 6. It was a Monday again, and like every other Monday, I had to drag myself out of bed for school. College had not been kind to me. My days had fallen into the same boring routine. I would wake up, take a shower, brush my teeth, get dressed, and then drive to my girlfriend's house to pick her up before class. It should have felt normal. It should have felt simple. But things stopped feeling normal after my mom bought a house near a huge farm field. From my bedroom window, all I could see was tall grass stretching out into the distance. During the day, it looked ordinary enough. Just a field, just plants, just land that farmers probably used at some point. But at night, it felt different. Whenever I looked out the window after dark, I got this strange feeling I could never explain properly. It felt like the grass was watching me, not moving in the wind, watching. I always rejected the thought as soon as it came. I would tell myself the same thing every time. It was just a field. Nothing lived there except maybe bugs, snakes, or small animals. Farmers worked that land. There was no reason to be scared of it. Still, every time I drove past it at night, the same awful thought entered my mind. What if I suddenly got pulled out of my car and dropped in the middle of that field? It was such a stupid thought, but it came so naturally that I could never stop it. The road beside the field was long and straight, with streetlights spaced too far apart. Sometimes I could barely see the next light ahead. Every time I passed one, my chest tightened. I would imagine something standing beneath the next pole, waiting. The whole drive only took around 3 minutes, but when I was on that road at night, it felt like an hour. I kept telling myself it was all in my head. I kept telling myself that until the night, everything changed. That was the night some of my old high school friends came over to see the new house. I had not seen them in a long time, so I was actually excited. We spent hours talking, joking, catching up on old memories, gossiping about people we used to know, and getting into those emotional conversations that only happen when you haven't seen someone in ages. For a while, I forgot about the field entirely. Then I made a mistake. At some point in the conversation, I casually admitted that the field creeped me out. "I'm scared looking at the fields," I said. One of my friends burst out laughing. "Dude, you're scared of grass?" I tried to explain it better. I said that when you live near a place like that, especially one that looks so empty and dark at night, your mind starts creating thoughts you can't really control. I told them it was not the grass itself. It was the feeling, the silence, the darkness, the way the place felt wrong at night. As soon as I said that, one of them got interested. "Then let's go check it out," he said. I immediately told him no. "Why would we go in there right now?" I asked. "It's 8 at night. It's completely dark." But he kept pushing it. "We won't stay long," he said. "I just want to see what's so scary about it." I knew it was a bad idea. Every part of me wanted to refuse. But there were 4 of us, and they were all acting like it was harmless. We had our phones, we had flashlights, and I kept telling myself we would just look around for a few minutes and leave. I did not want to be the one who ruined the night by refusing, so I agreed. As we walked toward the field, the moon hung overhead in a way that felt too bright, like it was watching us. The closer we got, the colder I felt. My arms were covered in goosebumps before we even reached the edge. "Come on," one of them said. "We're going in. Don't chicken out now." I wanted to say no again, but I didn't. I convinced myself that a quick walk into the field would probably make me feel stupid for ever being scared of it in the first place. so I followed them in. At first, it did not seem so bad. We pushed through the tall grass while our phone lights bounced around in front of us. I could hear bats overhead, crickets chirping, and my friends laughing at how ridiculous the whole thing was. "See," one of them said, "there's nothing out here. You've been scaring yourself for no reason." I wanted to believe him. I really did. For a moment, I almost relaxed. Then another friend noticed something on the ground. It was a bone, a dog bone, or at least that's what it looked like. Old, dry, and lying there, half hidden in the grass. He made a face and laughed nervously. "That's disgusting. I'll give someone $5 to take it home." We all looked at him for a second, trying to freak him out, but before anyone could joke back, the crickets stopped. Not gradually. All at once. The silence hit so hard that I noticed it immediately. At almost the same moment, clouds passed over the moon, and everything around us became pitch black except for the weak light from our phones. I told them right then that we should leave. No one listened. They insisted on walking farther. I hated myself for giving in again, but I kept following them. Then one of my friends suddenly snapped, "Hey, stop pushing me!" We all turned. Nobody was close enough to be touching him. "Dude, no one's even near you," another friend said. That was when I started hearing movement in the grass around us. Not random rustling, not wind, something moving, something keeping pace with us. A branch cracked somewhere to our right. We all froze. One of my friends called out, "Hello? Someone there?" Nothing answered. He took a step like he wanted to move toward the sound, but I grabbed his arm and whispered, "Something is in there." He looked at us like we were all losing it. "This isn't funny," he said. "Stop acting scared." Then, from farther ahead in the field, we heard it, running, fast. All of us turned at the same time and ran. The problem was that no matter how fast we moved, it didn't feel like we were getting closer to the exit. We should not have been that deep in the field. We had only walked in for a short time, but suddenly it felt endless. "What the hell?" one of my friends screamed. We weren't even that far in. The grass whipped against our legs and clothes as we ran. I could hear my friends breathing hard, crying, panicking, and somewhere behind us, and then on both sides too, I could hear something else moving fast through the field. I made the mistake of glancing back. There was a shape moving through the grass, tall, too tall. It wasn't running like us. It looked like it was gliding, almost floating over the ground. My stomach dropped. "Don't look behind you," I shouted. "Whatever you do, don't look behind you." One of my friends dropped his phone while running. He almost turned to grab it, but I screamed at him to leave it. We kept going until somehow, finally, we burst back out of the field near the entrance. We collapsed there, gasping for breath, and turned around. Nothing. No movement. No figure. Just the field. Then the crickets started chirping again. The clouds moved away from the moon. Everything looked normal. And then I saw it. A shape standing in the field, partly hidden in the grass. It slowly lowered its head and looked directly at me. I have never felt fear like that in my life. We ran back to my house and stayed inside, all of us talking over each other, trying to understand what had just happened. For the first time, nobody laughed at me. "You were right," one of them said. "There really is something in those fields. I'm never coming back here." I told everyone to sit down and drink some water. That was when the friend who dropped his phone spoke up. "Dude," he said quietly, "I need that phone back." I stared at him like he was insane. "No," I said. "You can get a new one." He shook his head. "It's not about the phone. My mom's bank account info is on there. Her passwords, too. She has short-term memory issues. If I don't get it back, I'm screwed," I snapped. "Dude, we are not going back there," I shouted. "If you need to, call your mom. But we are not going back into that field just because you dropped your phone." He went silent after that. None of us slept. At least I thought none of us slept. At some point, I must have drifted off because the next thing I remember was waking up in the middle of the night, thirsty. I got out of bed and went to the kitchen for water. As I stood there drinking, I noticed movement outside near the clothesline where I had left some clothes drying. At first, I thought it was the wind. Then I stepped closer to the window. There was a shadow moving toward it. I froze. It came close enough to tap on the glass. The only thing that saved me from completely losing my mind right there was the fact that the window was tinted. It could not see inside. After a few seconds, it slowly turned and glided back toward the field. I ran back and woke my friends up, telling them what I had seen. One of them just looked exhausted and said he had already had enough for one day and wanted to rest. I sat down again, trying to control my breathing. Inhale, exhale. It's nothing. You saw nothing. Then my phone rang. I looked down and saw it was a FaceTime call from the same friend whose phone had been dropped in the field. The problem was that he was right there in the room with me. I stared at the screen so long that another friend had to ask what was wrong. Then the realization hit all of us at once. It had his phone. The call ended. Then it called again. This time, one of my friends answered. The screen showed our house, but it was not filmed from normal height. The camera was much too high off the ground, maybe 15 feet or more. We could hear heavy breathing on the other end. My friend shouted, "Give me my phone back." Then it answered. It spoke in his voice. "Want it back? Come and get it." We ended the call instantly. Everyone was in shock. The friend whose voice had been copied looked like he was about to throw up. It kept calling after that. Again and again and again. Morning took forever. The calls finally stopped around 5 in the morning, but by then none of us had slept properly. I told them we should call the police and explain everything, but they refused. They said nobody would believe us. Even if the police searched the field, they probably would not find the phone or the thing. Then one of my friends said something that made my stomach twist. "What if we go in during the daytime? Monsters only come out at night, right?" We all stared at him. Then the friend who had lost the phone stood up and said, "I'm going back there." We tried to stop him. He ran out anyway. None of us followed him. That part still haunts me. I wish I could say we chased after him, dragged him back, did something brave. We didn't. We were too scared. We just stood there and let him go. Hours passed. Then more hours. He never came back. At first, I kept trying to convince myself he had gone home or gone somewhere else, or maybe decided to stay away out of anger. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. By the time evening came again, I couldn't sit still anymore. So I took my bike and went looking for him. As I got closer to the field, all the fear came rushing back. I stood there at the edge, staring into it, trying to make myself go in. Part of me wanted to leave immediately, but another part kept thinking about my friend alone in there. I called his phone. Nothing. No ringing. No sound except wind and crickets. Finally, I forced myself into the field. I turned on my flashlight and kept moving, calling his phone over and over. Still nothing. I thought about shouting his name, but I was terrified that if the thing heard me, it would copy my voice too. So I kept quiet and moved carefully. Then I heard something in the distance, a faint sound. I moved toward it. The smell hit me before the light showed me what I was looking at. It was not just a bad smell. It was thick, wet, rotten, and sweet at the same time. The kind of smell that sticks to the back of your throat and makes you want to gag. My flashlight flickered as I got closer, and then I saw what looked like a scarecrow. Except it was not a scarecrow. It was my friend. Or what was left of him. His body had been tied up and posed like one, hanging there in the field. Flies moved lazily over him. His body swayed slightly, even though there was barely any wind. And tied against one of his hands, wrapped up in grass, was his phone. The screen lit up. It was calling me. My name appeared on the screen. The whole image felt unreal. The flickering flashlights, the buzzing flies, the smell of rot. His body hanging there with his phone glowing in the dark like a trap. Then I heard the grass moving. Something was coming. It stepped in front of his body and answered the phone. Thank God I had muted mine earlier, because at that moment I knew if it heard even the smallest noise from me, it would know exactly where I was. I stayed perfectly still. Then its head turned toward me. And it smiled. I ran. I ran without thinking, crashing through the grass, crying so hard I could barely breathe. Behind me, I could hear it laughing. It was my friend's laugh. That was what broke me the most. Not just that it killed him, that it had his laugh. I kept running until I reached the edge of the field and grabbed my bike. I pedaled harder than I ever had in my life. At one point, without slowing down, I lifted my phone and snapped a picture behind me because I was too terrified to turn my head. Later, when I looked at that photo, I saw it. It was chasing me on all fours. I thought I had escaped when I reached the house. When I got there, I turned back. Nothing. Gone. Just like before. I told the others everything. We finally called the police. They arrived within 10 minutes and searched the field. They found nothing. No phone, no body, no signs of a struggle, no tracks, nothing. We called his phone again. Nothing. It was like the field had swallowed every trace of him. His parents begged the police to keep searching. For months, the investigation stayed open. Then, eventually, they gave up. They said there was not enough evidence, not enough to go on, not enough of anything. I went to his funeral. I still cannot believe that a stupid joke, one careless decision, turned into something that terrible. After that, I begged my mom to move. At first, she didn't want to. But when I showed her the picture I had taken while fleeing on my bike, the fear in her face was enough to tell me she finally believed me. 4 months later, we moved away. Even after leaving, I couldn't get over it. I blamed myself. If I had never said I was scared of the field, none of them would have gone in. If I had refused harder, maybe we would have stayed home. If I had gone after him sooner, maybe things would have been different. I tried therapy. I tried to move on. I tried to convince myself that distance would make the memory fade, but it never really does. Because no matter how much time passes, I know one thing for sure. Something is moving in the fields. Story 7. When I was 8 years old, there was a strange rule about the slide in the small playground behind our street. None of us were supposed to crawl underneath it. It wasn't written anywhere, and no adult had ever told us directly, but every kid knew it. The reason I remember that rule so clearly is because one afternoon, something under that slide grabbed my ankle. I hadn't thought about that place in years. Life moved on, as it does, and childhood fears slowly faded into something that felt distant and unreal. But last week I had to return to my hometown for work. After finishing my meetings, I found myself driving through the streets I grew up on without really planning to. It just happened naturally, like muscle memory guiding my hands on the wheel. I passed the old grocery store with its cracked parking lot and faded sign exactly as I remembered it. For a moment, it felt like nothing had changed. Then I noticed the playground. It was still there, or at least part of it was. The swings looked newer, and everything had been repainted in bright colors. The old metal structures were gone, replaced by plastic ones, but the slide was still in the same spot. I slowed my car and came to a stop. It was the middle of the day, and the place was empty. The swings moved gently in the wind, and the chains made that dry, creaking sound I remembered so well. Through the open window, I could smell the warm scent of mulch and dry leaves. I might have driven away if I hadn't looked under the slide. The mulch there was disturbed. I could clearly see small handprints pressed into the wood chips. There were many of them overlapping each other, messy and crowded. At first, I thought they were just kids playing. But then I noticed something wrong. Some of the prints were too long. The fingers were thin and stretched, spaced too far apart to belong to any child. A car honked behind me, snapping me out of it. I quickly drove away, but the image stayed in my mind. That's when I remembered Marcus. Back when we were kids, that playground was our world. It sat just beyond a group of oak trees, right beside the road. It wasn't anything special, just a couple of swings, a climbing frame, and a slide that got so hot in the sun it could burn your legs. The slide stood on a raised platform about 6 feet high. There was a ladder on one side, and the slide itself on the other. Underneath it was a dark space where the supports met the ground. Some kids liked to pretend it was a secret hideout. We had just moved into our house that summer, and I was bored all the time. The playground was the first place I found other kids. On my first day there, I ran straight to the slide. I climbed up, slid down, and repeated it again and again. It felt like freedom. The third time I reached the top, someone grabbed my sleeve. I looked down and saw a small girl, probably around 6 years old, with dark hair tied back in a bright pink band. She pointed under the slide and said, "Don't go all the way to the back." I asked her why. She just shrugged and said, "It puts its hands in there." I didn't take her seriously. Every playground had that one kid who made up weird rules and stories. I pulled my sleeve free and kept playing. That's when I met Marcus. He lived just a few houses down from me and was in my class at school. He had this habit of chewing the strings on his hoodie until they were soaked and frayed. He also thought he was better at climbing than he actually was. He nodded toward the space under the slide and asked if I had heard about it. I asked what he meant. He told me we weren't supposed to go under there because it talked. I laughed. It sounded like another made-up story. He said Tyler had heard it. Tyler was older than us and always claimed he had done something dangerous or strange. I asked what it said. Marcus hesitated before saying it had whispered Tyler's name. I didn't believe any of it, but I still crouched down and looked under the slide. It was darker than I expected, even in the sunlight. The sand inside looked untouched, smooth and still. I stuck my head in for a moment. It felt cooler inside, quiet and unmoving. There was nothing. I told Marcus it was just sand, and we ran off to play on the swings. I forgot about it for the rest of the day, but Marcus didn't. I noticed he kept glancing back at the slide even while we were playing. A few days later, he tripped while we were running and fell near the opening. When he got up, he just stood there, staring into the darkness. He said he thought he heard something, but couldn't explain what. After that, he started acting differently. One day, I found him lying on the ground with his head halfway under the slide. When I called his name, he raised a finger to silence me like he was listening to someone. Another time, a younger kid came up and tried to get him to play. Marcus ignored him. When the kid said his name, Marcus repeated it softly, then leaned into the slide and whispered it into the darkness like he was passing the name along. That was the moment things started to feel wrong. Kids stopped going near him after that. Even adults noticed and told him to get away from there, but he always had some excuse. Eventually, curiosity got the better of me. One day when Marcus wasn't around, I decided to crawl under the slide myself. I told myself it was just to prove there was nothing there. The space felt smaller once I was inside. The plastic above me seemed lower, and the air was still and heavy. At first, everything looked normal. Then I heard something behind me. I turned and saw marks in the sand that hadn't been there before. Thin lines like something had dragged its fingers across the ground, stopping just inches away from me. I panicked and rushed out, hitting my shoulder against the slide as I scrambled to the sunlight. I didn't tell anyone about it. The next day, Marcus asked if I had gone under the slide. I was surprised he knew. He said it told him. I laughed it off, but he didn't smile. When I admitted I heard something move, he nodded and said it liked it when someone stayed. That sentence stayed with me. After that, Marcus spent more and more time under the slide. Sometimes he would lie there with his legs sticking out. Other times he would sit and whisper into the darkness. He once told me it sounded like someone whispering through their teeth. One day he said it asked if he was still there, and he told it yes. Then came the day everything changed. The playground was quiet when I arrived. Marcus was under the slide again, his legs sticking out. I called his name, but he didn't respond. I got closer and looked inside. He was further in than usual, almost completely hidden. Then I saw something move behind him. Marcus spoke without turning around. He said it wanted me to come in. I refused. He said it knew I had been there before. Then a hand reached out from the darkness. It grabbed my ankle. The grip was cold, even through my sock, and unbelievably strong. It pulled me forward, dragging me toward the opening. I kicked hard, and one of the fingers bent backward. The grip loosened just enough for me to pull free. I ran as fast as I could. When I got home, my ankle had red marks wrapped around it like thin bruises. My mother said I must have hurt myself while playing. I didn't argue. 2 days later, Marcus disappeared. The police searched everywhere, including the playground. I watched as one officer shone a flashlight under the slide. He didn't react to anything and moved on. The next morning, I went back alone. Under the slide, the sand was covered in handprints. So many that there was barely any empty space left. Among them were deeper marks, long and unnatural. I told myself I would just look one last time, but I went inside again. As soon as I crawled in, something brushed the back of my neck. I panicked and slammed my head trying to get out. I scrambled backward, sand filling my clothes, until I reached the open air. I ran home shaking. Marcus's family moved away not long after. Years passed. The playground aged, and eventually the old slide was removed. I remember watching from behind a fence as workers dug around it. Beneath it, they uncovered a dark hole in the ground. It was too small for an adult, but just big enough for something to hide. I told myself it was gone. But last week, when I saw those handprints under the new slide, I wasn't so sure anymore. I sat in my car longer than I should have, staring at that playground. Then I drove away.